All right. So you go ahead and start.
Oh, drop me. All right. All right. So, can you tell us a little bit about your job as the founder and CEO of Hidden Voices?
Hidden Voices, the found as my job with Hidden Voices, I consider it to be a passion more so than a job. So my responsibilities are to coach and help others to do the same thing that I did as far as researching my family tree, because a lot of people have questions. A lot of people have questions, and I help them go and unearth and uncover all those different voices in their family tree that they want to know about.
Okay. Now, how did your experience in the Marines
Ah,
impact your current job?
my experience in the Marine Corps impacted my current job. I would say the Marine Corps taught me resilience, resilience, and to keep going, don't stop. And with my hidden voices, with helping other people uncover things in their genealogy, like I did with my research, there were a lot of stumbling blocks, but I had to keep going and keep that resilience and never stop. And here I am today.
Can you tell us a bit about your experiences doing genealogical research?
Yes, yes. Well, it started, my experience doing genealogy research started back in 1989. As a high school student, I had to do so many hours of volunteer work. And that volunteer work was in the library. And on the fifth floor of the Atlanta Public Library, they have a genealogy floor. And sometimes when I took breaks, I would get lost in the genealogy floor. And that love for genealogy has been with me ever since throughout my Marine Corps career. And here I am now.
Now, how exactly did you conduct this research? Where did you find the resources and the information?
All right. As I mentioned, I started conducting this research through 1989. We had something you guys probably don't know about. It's called microfiche. And I went through rows of microfiche looking at different census records. And I started with the census records and also used different reference books for that particular time. And also had contacts with the landowner back then. His great granddaughter had also done research, so I used some of her records, and that helped.
Now, how long exactly did it take you to do all this research?
That's a good question. It took me the length of time, starting in 1989, and I'm not done. It's continuous. So there's a lot of different things I'm finding out every year. I usually spend a little time doing my personal family tree every year. So it's continuous.
All right. What interesting things have you found doing genealogical research into your family's history?
The most interesting thing I found doing genealogy on my family was the will of George Waters. And he was the landowner, and in his will he mentioned my great grandfather, April Waters, in the actual will. And that was one of the interesting things I found out. And that I think a copy of is in one of the history books, Gwinnett County history books.
All right. If you don't mind me asking, what are your personal opinions on that will? Like,
On the book, what
on
am I?
on what's said there?
Oh, my, how I feel personally about the book, it shows it should be exposed more. A lot of people need to know about it. I think it holds questions to history for a lot of Americans that have gaps in their history. And it helped me connect the dots. So I think it's a perfect book about the history of Gwinnett County.
So, what are your thoughts about April Waters, particularly about his life and his final resting place here at Macedonia?
My thoughts on April Waters, my great grandfather. That one's emotional because there's a gap in information. There's a gap in information, and his resting place being here in Johns Creek sort of connected that gap. When I found out about the research that Johns Creek had done on my great grandfather, it helped. It helped connect the dots. There were a lot of gaps, like I say, in time because of Jim Crow. A lot of different things happened in our history. So it helped to have Johns Creek Historical Society connect those dots, and having done the research, it was good.
How have your findings impacted you personally and your family?
How did my findings impact me personally? I would say it, as I mentioned, it connected the dots. It gave me an actual sense of history. I could read about it in a history book, but actually going there and actually seeing the cemetery and actually going to the area sort of came full circle for me and helped me out.
Do you have any stories about your family members' reactions in learning about April Waters and your genealogical history?
Yes, I have stories about it. My uncles would talk about the history of our family in this area with my grandfather, but like I said, there was a gap between my great grandfather and April Waters because of what was going on during the time, Jim Crow and everything. So the only stories I knew about was ones of where my grandfather was raised in this area, but he left because of an incident that he had that dealt with that particular time that we were going through as far as Jim Crow and everything. And he moved to Atlanta, and that's where we've been ever since.
Now, what are your thoughts on the projects groups like ours and community members have done to preserve the cemetery itself and April Waters' legacy?
My thoughts on groups like yourself doing research and preserving the legacy is, I like to say it's you're the next generation. And the history, you can, like I mentioned, you can learn about it in history books, but to walk through it and actually see the history and touch it, you get a different understanding about it.
In your opinion, how important are cemeteries like this one, and how important are the stories of residents like April Waters?
I think the story of my great-great-grandfather and cemeteries like this are important because it shows us that we have a history, and whether it's good, whether it's bad, the whole story needs to be told. It's just like any story. You have to tell the complete story. And with the cemetery being here and when preserving the cemetery, the story, we know that the story can be carried on by the next generation, like yourselves.
Now, at what point do you believe that you have fulfilled your promise to your father to finish your research on the family tree and April Waters?
That's a good question. I don't think there's a point. I think it's continuous. As I said, history is always going, and you always find new information. So I don't think there's a point in actual time where I say I'm complete, because there's more to learn. There was a lot of things that weren't written during my father's time, my grandfather's time, my great-grandfather's time. We have the technology now, and like the next generation, like you're doing now, to actually annotate that history but doing it and actually doing it correctly like you're doing it helps us for the next generations.
What kind of impact do you think the maintenance and restoration of this cemetery will have on Johns Creek?
I think it will have good. I think Johns Creek, the impact that it will have, the restoration and preserving the legacy of the cemetery will have a good impact on Johns Creek, because it shows that Johns Creek is setting the example for other cities, setting the example as far as maintaining the history and telling the complete story for other cities. And I think Johns Creek will be the shining example on how to do it.
Now, do you believe that there's possibly any new information to be found, like relating to the Macedonia cemetery and the deceased here?
Yes. I think there's always new information to be found about the cemetery, because at one time there were probably records, and somebody has those records, or somebody has an old Bible, and there's other descendants out there like myself to come up and tell their story that they know from their families. So there's more history to learn. I think this is probably buried in somebody's house or a church somewhere that we need to bring forth, and doing this documentary will help.
Are there any other stories you found you want to share?
The only other story, it's like I say, history has its good sides and its bad sides, and part of the reason my grandfather left this area, he mentioned that his father left this area because it would be my great-grandfather, Austin Waters, the son of April Waters, left this particular area. As I mentioned, the climate was kind of different back then, and Jim Crow, and he had had a run-in with a bad run-in with someone in the area. So he decided to leave because of the Jim Crow laws and everything. Even though it was the same in Atlanta, he decided to move for more employment as well as leave because of that. That's the only interesting stories, and I think that's what made the gap in my family learning the history, is because he decided to leave.
Thank you very much for doing this interview with us.
Can you also just say your name and what you do really quickly?
Yes.
Just say it so
Okay.
we can say it to them.
Yes, my name is Madyun Shahid. I'm the great-great-grandson of April Waters. I'm also the CEO and founder of Hidden Voices. And the Hidden Voices, we help coach others in doing their genealogy research and bringing alive that literal voice as well as figuratively voice of their history.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so